All right, welcome Jason. Thank you for coming to the Money Minutes
Thank you.
Business Owner Series. Before I get into any business questions, may I please ask you about your background? Who was Jason growing up, teenager, and how did Jason get into martial arts?
Short story, make it a short story because it's quite a long journey. Boy growing up in a neighborhood, of course, that wasn't necessarily the greatest, of which we have many in Canada. I don't think many people realize that Canada also has its poverty centers. But growing up there with a single mom and my sister Danielle, and of course my sister Amber came along about 9 years later. My mother, of course, raised us to, of course, turn away from a lot of the upheaval that was going on around us and to really focus our attention on who we wanted to be and where we wanted to go. She taught us.
So she was a single mom with 3 children?
She was a single mom with 3 kids. She was working 2 jobs, usually going to school. She went to George Brown, Humber College. I remember her working sometimes until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning and falling asleep in the kitchen, working on projects for her school to elevate her education because she did not want to take social assistance. She didn't want to take welfare. She felt that it was beneath her, that she was capable of working, and she also wanted us to understand that we have it within our means to rise.
So she was a very hardworking, strong-willed lady.
She was, yeah, to the point of making her so sick a lot of the time.
Do you think you are who you are because of her today?
I'm very much the man that I am today because of this woman. There's no doubt about that.
So when you say rough neighborhood, how does that impact a child?
It gets you to begin to identify with yourself as poor. We use the word poor a lot, and a lot of that can have a big impact on limiting the way that we see ourselves or how far we can go. That kind of neighborhood can make you angry. It can make you point the finger at the people that have, and how come they're not involved or they don't understand. It can make you want to reach out to build relationships with other people that may be a means of managing what maybe is missing at home. So gangs tend to form out of that kind of idea, where you begin to build relationships that are predicated on loyalty and trust that really are far more destructive. But it just simply happens as a result of a young person trying to cope and manage with a scenario that they can't sort of make sense of.
So Jason, how did martial art happen?
Martial arts, of course, stemmed out of the idea that I've always been around fighting my whole life.
So you were fighting as a teenager, as
a
young Canadian?
A lot of fights when I was a kid in the schoolyard and trying to get my point across. But it was usually not as a means of trying to push my authority over somebody, but usually as a result of feeling a compassion for another individual would elicit my want to get involved. So a lot of my fights that I had when I was a kid was usually over somebody else that was in trouble or backing up a friend or whatever.
So trying to protect somebody else.
Yeah, very protective energy.
So your message today when you teach children, young Canadians, what I hear from young Canadians, and I've spoken to some of your students, it's very different. The message is very different. Martial art, you say, is not about fighting.
It's not about fighting in a sense that it's not limited there. So it's a place that we begin, and it's a place that we all understand. It's very elementary. The idea for a child to hold up their hands or want to smack or pull or gouge or poke somebody, it's just natural. It's an inclination that we have to physically experiencing a reality. But we tend to sort of stop there, and we tend to see it no further than that. We exploit it, we celebrate it, and we spend a lot of our time in this very elementary view of martial arts, where martial arts also embodies a larger spectrum. And the spectrum also moves into a way of moving past that and into other areas which are compassion and benevolence, better self-management.
I have seen you relate fighting to mental peace, and I have never seen that odd combination talked about together as one. How do you relate the two? Fighting, becoming physically strong versus having mental strength?
A good way to put it would be like seeing us as a white light, and we all can understand that on some level. And when that white light meets a prism, of course, and the prism, of course, divides a light, like light coming into a window, and you're seeing these rainbows.
You see a rainbow
in your living room. And the idea is that that's what martial arts sort of provides. It provides sort of this this entropy, this resistance, so that we begin to divide the parts that we don't understand, so we can begin to, of course, understand them individually. And that's where this has to begin. It has to begin physically. So it's a way of taking something that is very metacognitive, something that is we can't relate to in terms of the thinking inside our head, and making it something physical outside ourselves that we can begin to understand through engaging it. And then, of course, the ideas begin to come, the opening begins to come, the translation, the self-management begins to evolve out of that. Mm-hmm. But it can't happen by just simply thinking about it.
That's very interesting. I have not seen that analogy before, where you talk about martial art, which is all about physical ability to fight and win a fight. But at the same time, that fight is making you mentally stronger.
If you look at somebody who's fighting in the UFC today, which is quite popular, or boxing, is that if you look at these people that have fought, many of them, they are all unique, but the ones that stick with it and go and find their way through as an extreme, they've used that as an employment to survive or to provide, or whatever their reasons were, or to make a point or a statement. But almost all of them arrive at a place where they realize that it wasn't about fighting in itself, that fighting made them something more. A lot of them become great philanthropists. A lot of them begin to sort of adopt a larger message. They begin to change. And that's an extreme. We don't all want to put our children or ourselves through that extreme that these individuals have discovered in that direction. But we can sort of learn from that and begin to understand it better in a way that helping people understand before they have to, of course, adopt that methodology. We're thinking that that's the only way. There's no other way to understand this source abstract of conflict within ourselves by just thinking about it. We have to actually make it real. And that's where it becomes structure. And that structure lends itself to understanding, and that understanding lends itself to liberation, not just, of course, to celebration of fighting.
So Jason, today, community sees you as a very successful business owner. You have educated thousands of kids in the area of martial art. They have become mentally, physically strong. They still have a bond with you. You know, we have in Ontario, in Canada, we have 70% of the employment. You know, we think it's provided by big corporations. It's not. 70% of the employment is provided by self-employed individuals like yourself. Okay? But starting a business is not that easy, as I understand. So tell us your initial struggles. Because, you know, people out there, the audience that we have for the Money Minutes channel, they would like to know if it's a good idea to be in the business, or maybe it's better to stick to a job.
My humble opinion on that, from my experience, is that there are people among us that simply are entrepreneurs. We have a drive within ourselves. There's something that we see, or we want to create, or we want to change, or whatever that might be. And we have to, of course, follow what our instincts tell us and our hearts tell us. Schools don't necessarily provide that ability to navigate. We're given the selection of what jobs to choose, and education in terms of post-secondary education to get into the right university, or whatever the case may be, seems to be the fallout. But for many people, that's not the right direction, and it can be a very great source of stress, trying to force somebody in a direction that goes against their natural inclination or their feeling. So if you are one of those individuals that feels that there's something for you to create in this world as a means of your own ideas and your own inclinations and your own interests that can help or bring something to this world table, you have to kind of follow that, and that can be very scary.
So if you're passionate about an idea, and you know you're the individual that wants to be in your own business, then it's okay to try that?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. You establish what your idea might be, and then the first step would be, in a way, is kind of going back to an elementary way of thinking, which is very much almost like martial arts, where the blinders go on. You're like a white belt or a yellow belt. You're not there to look at anyone else, just focus on what it is that you need to accomplish at that time, because you have to build a foundation of understanding. In karate or martial arts, we call this kihon, which is the fundamental basics. And when you're doing that, you're literally in a state of greed. You're literally in a state of selfishness, which serves its purpose. Okay,
state of selfishness.
Yeah.
Is this the first stage of entrepreneurship?
I would say so. You can't help anyone else if you can't first help yourself. And in order to help yourself, you need to be selfish.
Do something. Let me ask you, who financed you as an entrepreneur?
Well, it wasn't the banks. And the banks, they say that they're on our side, but I think that they're more self-interested than they are, of course, interested in actually investing in a community or in ideas. However, that's not for me to decide. but I had almost given up, and I was looking at other avenues. I'd sold my pickup truck, my motorcycle, I sold everything I had, paid off any debt that I had. And my mother, seeing me stressed, of course, having very little, she had a little condo apartment, and she had purchased that with an inheritance that my grandfather left her shortly before that when he passed away. And
So are you saying your mother came to rescue?
She stepped in on her own. I never asked. She stepped in and she said, if nobody else will believe in you, then I will. I know my son. And she said, I know what you're capable of, and I know you'll be successful at this. And I think sometimes being a new business person, all it takes is sometimes just to have even just one person believe in you. So if it's not going to be a bank, then maybe sometimes it might be somebody in your family or nearby. But she knew that I was destined for entrepreneurship. She knew that there was no other way for me to live in this world. So she probably thought, well, you know what, even if he fails, we'll still manage. We're already used to going without, so if I lose my apartment, we'll all survive. It's not like we've not been there before. So I think that fear of her losing her apartment wasn't a big issue. Her fear was more of her child, her son, struggling so diligently. Was more of a fear that he wouldn't, of course, be able to accomplish things in his life.
So she has been your rock right from the get-go.
All the way through my childhood, yeah. And if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't have a martial arts school or any business for that matter. She co-signed for a loan. It was a small loan, but she co-signed for it. She put up her apartment against it, her condo. It was enough to get me indemnified with my lease, and then of course, when I was basically navigating my lease, for which my mentor, my martial arts teacher, my main martial arts teacher, Sensei Wallace Ply, who's been a great insight in my life in this destination that I'm on. He also was a part of that as well in terms of negotiating, but they weren't going to give me the lease. So I met.
So this is for business owners. If you're thinking of becoming a self-employed business owner, remember, financing is going to be an issue. Who believes in your passion, your idea, your purpose is going to be a huge thing. Jason, now fast forward 16 years.
Yeah.
How's your business today?
Okay, so from that rocky beginning, from sleeping in my office and having nothing and eating macaroni and eating beans, I even built a kitchen into my workspace so that I could live there knowing that I had nothing.
Great memories, right?
So it was a great memory looking back in retrospect, but it was a necessary one. If you want something, you have to be willing to go all the way. If you want to start your own business, it can't be convenient. There is no convenience in starting a business. This is all you. Yeah. Every little bit of you. So fast forwarding.
Somebody just said to me that if it's not hurting and if it's not painful, you're not going through a change.
Yeah, or another way of saying it is that you can't rise to low expectations.
So now you have reached a level where you have a business model and other student of yours can actually replicate that model. They can take your teaching, your learnings, and replicate them to others.
Yes.
So, help others with that.
And they are, and it takes a long time. I use the analogy is that in business, are you looking at, of course, just keep growing flowers in a garden and selling them, or do you want to create a mountain in terms of its influence? So there's different ways of coming at your business. There's nothing wrong with that. I chose that I wanted to build a mountain in terms of influencing things versus just things that I could grow quickly and sell. So for me, the people that have left my school that are moving outward and onward, they have decided on their own to adopt that model in their own way to make their own mountain grow.
And young Canadians, it is such an important topic today because kids, a lot of times we find them lost. They have this urge to become rich very quick.
Yes, they do.
They feel that if they are going to be on social media or they're going to have some sort of online business and they are going to become rich. It is happening to some of those guys. Congratulations, great job. But a lot of our youth, a lot of our kids are lost. And they're thinking that's what's going to happen. What I admire the most about your students is that when they graduate from your school, I've been doing my own research, the humility that I see in these kids. They become physically strong, they become professionals, they've achieved their black belts, but they are so down to earth. They are so helpful, and they're so hardworking. I see them working with you. So Jason, my last question to you is, if there are business owners watching this program right now, what are 2 or 3 tips that you would have for them?
One of the things that gets sold a lot in terms of martial arts today, because it's become very commercial, is black belt concept. In terms of
everybody wants to get to a black belt right away.
And what's happened, of course, is that black belt, of course, has a value based on the individual's understanding of what they put into that, the meaning that they provide, the metaphor that it supports. If I give that black belt and sell it to a 9-year-old and to their family for $1,000 or $1,500, really all I'm selling is just a piece of cotton. And I think that concept most can agree with. Is that 9-year-old a black belt? Well, they are by the standards of that school, of course. But at my school, or within our organization of Classical Martial Arts of Canada, and of course almost with IMAF out of the Philippines, is the idea that black belt stands for something far more. It stands for principles and virtue. So we're not selling the belt, but we're offering something far more important. And I think a business needs to decide what they're selling. Are they going to support it with a value? If you're a mechanic, or is it about selling, of course, a transmission? Or is it about the service that goes into that? Is it about changing that life, elevating an individual, making them feel better, working with them? Because now the transmission just becomes a means to an end. It's not about it itself, but it becomes about something more.
So how committed are you to your purpose and the value?
Yes. So you can even take a plant, and by looking at it from an alternate way, the plant can become a metaphor, a means of transformation beyond just, of course, the thing itself. So that's one way we got to begin, and that's how I look at martial arts. It's not a black belt I'm selling. I'm teaching somebody, of course, to arrive at a state of understanding far beyond just the color of their belt. But that's for me. Everybody's business has to decide what they want to do. The next step, of course, is to say, what is it that I need out of this? Because if that's what I want to accomplish, what do I also need? And then that's where we kind of go back to the foundations again. I can't provide that unless until I have a foundation. So it can become a tricky place to navigate. So that's where we have to we have that idea in a way, okay, that's where I want to be, that's my long-term goal, but I can't be there right away. I need to focus more on just being here, and that is paying the bills, establishing, getting money in the bank, paying off debt, and that is almost a luxury. So in the martial arts world, for me, many people that are selling a belt, is that they've got stuck on the luxury side, so they got stuck on the greed side, on the focus on what can I get out of it, not what can I put into people side. And right. I'm now focused more on the luxury side, which is what can I actually put in versus what can I get out. So there's a balance, but that's for each business and entrepreneur to decide. The third one, in terms of my experience, or the last one, is that now that you've kind of got that going, where further can you go? Because if you don't return back to the beginning and reestablish your footing, the business will eventually collapse. You're lost, or you'll be consumed by it.
Right.
And a lot of entrepreneurs arrive there. They hit the 5-year, 10-year, 15-year mark, whatever, and then they feel that there's no further for them to go, or they begin to not clean their dining room, or they don't think about remodeling their chairs, or they've become jaded in a way where sometimes people can pull on us and stress us and excuse us, which is what we do. You have to remember to always ignore that, focus on your direction, remind yourself of what you're there, reestablish what that purpose is, come back to your beginnings again when you are able to do so, and reestablish that footing.
That's right.
So paint your office, maybe a different office, look at your staff, reassess things. Where are we going? You must keep doing that. Otherwise you can easily capitulate to something that was never a part of your original design, your heartfelt momentum that got you to start.
And do you think, Jason, that to have a sustainable business, it's important to give back to the society?
If you can.
If you can.
If you can, and I think some people can't. But there's other ways to do that, in kind. There's other ways. It doesn't have to be money. It can be in a kind word. It can be in seeing your neighbor and knocking on their door and you're just giving them a cup of coffee for no reason, and you lift their day.
Absolutely.
It can be so many other ways that we can do that, even if we're not in a state to financially begin to reach out. We tend to think money is the limit in terms of the way that we can help, but in terms of business, we need to see that us, in terms of small businesses, we are together. From that local coffee shop to that local mechanic to the transmission place to the local investment group that are trying to operate against all these very large competitors, of course, that can sometimes be very overwhelming to do so. We need to support our local community. We need to support our local neighbors.
That's right.
You know what?
Jason, the way I look at your business, it's a very noble business that you're in. You have a very humble nature. You don't show at all that you have a very successful established business. You're always continuously helping young Canadians, helping parents, and helping communities. It's a blessing to have you and
Thank
your
you.
business in the
Thank you.
community, and I wish you continued success.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.